Guys, so it's been a while since I've done a multi-book review, and I've been reading some watercolor books that don't necessarily have accompanying products that I wanted to be able to talk to you guys about because I enjoy reading watercolor books, and I know many of you guys enjoy watercolor books. So I have 4 with me today. We're going to talk about Creative Abstract Watercolor by Kate Rebecca Leach. We're going to talk about Watercolor Made Simple by Nicki Traikos. We're going to talk about 15-minute watercolor masterpieces and gouache in 4 easy steps by Koliadych. And if you enjoy this format of watercolor book reviews, let me know down in the comments below. I'm looking forward to hearing your feedback, or you can reach out to me on Patreon or Blue Sky. I love when I've been sitting on packages for so long that I think I know what's in there, but I'm not 100% sure. I particularly love when packages utilize discrete packaging, so I have no idea what's in there anymore. And this is one of them. I think I know what this is, but I don't want to commit to saying I know what this is until we open it. And you guys might be like, well, why didn't you open it first? Because I think with a lot of these, showing how things are packaged is important. It's an important part of the review. It's an important part of deciding whether or not something is a good fit for you. Was it well packaged or poorly packaged? Did it arrive in shambles, or is Becca just a mess? I'm a mess. Let's see. Oh, there we go. All right. It is what I thought it is. Okay, good. I'm not totally losing it. Okay, so I will read the note after. This was ordered through Etsy, although this is available elsewhere. I purchased it from the artist. I've had this in and out of my cart for a while, and you can get this elsewhere. You don't have to get it on Etsy. This is Creative Abstract Watercolor by Essoldo Designs, or Kate Rebecca Leach, The Beginner's Guide to Expressive and Imaginative Painting. Oh, it was signed. That's probably why I got it through Etsy. Anyway, I follow her on Instagram. Her art is beautiful, and I kind of wanted to get into her head and learn some of her thought process. So this is released by David and Charles. And I think I have this. I have seen this one and considered buying it. And this has been in and out of my cart. So anyway, I'm going to read this and get back to you guys. But I did want to share the unboxing because I did buy it from the artist herself. And, one of the perks of buying from the artist themselves, whether it is somebody on Etsy or from my shop, is that often, okay, first of all, us artists, we love when people love our stuff. It makes our day. It makes us so happy. And a lot of us will go out of our way to make that experience just a little bit more special because, you validated us. You like our stuff. You like what we're doing, and that means a lot. So when I can, I do try to buy directly from the artist shop or from the artist Etsy when it's possible. But, no shade if you cannot, because let's be real, Amazon offers free shipping if you've got Prime, and Etsy shipping, I know from lived experience because I did a bunch of Christmas shopping on Etsy, gets expensive fast. So we have a lovely, it's very cute, signed card. Dear Becca, thanks for supporting my small business. I hope you love your new book. Sending love from London, Kate. And then, that's beautiful. She included a card that I can send to somebody else, like a little extra freebie, which is very smart on her part because it's a little extra promotion. If I'm sending it to somebody and they like the art, they might go check her out. So very smart there. And those are the kind of nice little extras. You're not really it's hard to do that when you're doing Amazon. Sometimes you can if you're fulfilling Amazon yourself, like we are with Volume 2. Sometimes it's just totally out of your hands. But I thought it'd be fun to share this with you guys.
This is Creative Abstract Watercolor, the Beginner's Guide to Expressive and Imaginative Painting by Essoldo Design or Kate Rebecca Leach. This was purchased through her Etsy and the publisher is David and Charles. I paid $24.99 for this book. The format is larger than Page Street, which allows for more on the page and allows for her to use her design elements as page decoration, which is so inviting. The book itself is a lovely teal with gold embossing, and it's quite attractive. She also admits to having an art education at the very front of the book, which I appreciate as someone who also has formal art training. It seems that this is a book that celebrates creating textures in watercolor, and I am here for that. She defines abstract art and recommends 6 artists from history that readers can look up to for inspiration, and this is already my kind of book. She even refreshed her own education to prep for creating this book, and I love to see it. She's able to explain her work and how she utilizes elements deliberately, which I think is fantastic for learning and experienced artists alike. She goes over the materials she uses, and since she's big on adding embellishments, it does differ from the list of some other artists. Her demonstration photos are close up, include the brush, and are large enough to follow. I really love that she dedicates a lot of time to textures and creating textures with lovely close-up shots that show how the brush is handled. I think she uses Art of Soil paints sometimes, and I know I have some of those paints that I bought a while back, so it might be a good time for me to pull them out and try them out. As we get into the projects themselves, I would really like more step-by-step. There's plenty of room on the page for more process. She does utilize arrows to point things out, but we could do with both. I do think the ideas behind these projects are pretty enough to be framed as household art or sent as cards or used as bookmarks. I really love seeing just how a very light layer of a very simple texture, like on page 46, can change how the whole area looks and give it a lot more dimension. This is not so much a step-by-step book, but she shows you how she thinks and encourages you to take a risk and try it for yourself. I feel like these projects are all very meditative, which could be great for folks who are interested in art for relaxation. I think she has a really lovely sense and use of color. On page 114, she has a lovely flowering and striping exercise, but I wish she walked us through that step by step for the project because I feel like she has better control over this technique than I do, and I'd like to analyze her process to see what I can learn. I really love the use of texture throughout this book. I think glazing and texture are two things that make watercolor truly magical. I do wish we got more step-by-step demonstration in the projects themselves. I know she explains the techniques at the beginning, but having her walk us through her nuances in the individual projects would be great. While I'm not sure this book is a great place to start for watercolor, I do think it offers a lovely alternative for those not entirely confident in their drawing skills, or for those interested in watercolor for meditation and relaxation. The projects are lovely, and it's nice to see her alternative projects as well. She has an online shop. I'm not going to show it here, but she has some beautiful art prints as well as originals for sale. This is a lovely, larger book full of interesting ideas for adding mixed media and texture to your watercolor work. I'm not sure this works as a standalone for a beginner, but the projects are very accessible for those who are brave or for those who are willing to make mistakes while trying new things. This is not a step 1, step 2, step 3, do as I say sort of book, and it gives you insight into how Kate thinks about watercolor, which I love as a fellow artist and watercolor illustrator. Her abstracts and florals are particularly charming to me. All in all, I really enjoyed Creative Abstract Watercolor. I would recommend this book if you're looking to pick up some new techniques, if you're interested in trying out some new textures, or if you're interested in exploring watercolor from a meditative or abstract standpoint. I think she covers techniques that can be useful for a wide array of watercolor artists, including watercolor comic artists like myself, and I think this is a wonderful book both for beginners and for more experienced painters who are looking looking to try something new. This could be a wonderful book to kind of help you generate ideas for projects for classes, as many of these projects are quite accessible and don't require a lot of preparation or drawing skills for them to be executed very nicely. If you are interested in learning watercolor, or if you're interested in learning some new watercolor skills, I highly recommend Creative Abstract Watercolor. Make sure you check the description below. I will have all the links you need so that you can order your own copies of this beautiful book. This is Watercolor Made Simple by Nicki Traikos of Life Eye Design. This book includes traceable designs as well as QR codes. This is a quarry book. It was $24.99 at time of purchase, and it was published in 2023. The trace and paint templates are in the back, along with instructions on how to use a window as a light table, which I think is really neat. I love nature illustration, so I've selected a series of nature-inspired watercolor books to review, hoping to find some inspiration and some fresh ideas, and to just bask in the beautiful watercolor animals and plants. This part of the review has actually been, what's the reverse of time-lapse? Slowed down, so that I have enough footage of the book to talk over. So if it's a little disconcerting how slowly I'm flipping through, it is because it has intentionally been slowed down. So early on, she includes a nice clear photo of what I assume her painting setup looks like. I think including these kinds of visuals is helpful for beginner artists, and as an intermediate painter, I love seeing how other artists work. I love seeing their studios. I love seeing their setups. Until we get to the individual projects, this book covers everything that pretty much all other influencer and influential artist watercolor books I've read have covered in a very similar way. She recommends you read the whole book, including all the projects cover to cover, but if she's just retreading old ground, that can get old fast. I wonder how one balances assuming your audience has already explored this interest a little bit while still covering important ground. Maybe include QR codes for more information, or focus on how you, the writer and artist, specifically do things. I think that would be the most interesting to me as a fellow artist. Her advice for finding time to paint is to wake up 30 minutes before everyone else. How's that working out for you guys? I gotta tell you guys, it does not work for me. I have ADHD and I have Sjogren's. I get up 2 hours after everybody else. What helps me is selling my spouse on the idea that watercolor helps me self-regulate and keeps me sane. And then he helps me make time for that by taking on more chores. I don't recommend burning your candle at both ends while trying to make everybody else happy. But if getting up earlier than everybody else works for you, that is fantastic. It just absolutely does not work for me. And I don't necessarily think it's that realistic of a suggestion. She also recommends carving out a dedicated space. While I agree, and I think that's fantastic, I know it's a luxury and it can be challenging to do. I wish one of these books would talk about creating a portable workspace or just a quick setup workspace, because I feel like that's way more accessible for the majority of adults who are coming back to art. I have worked from both breakdown and portable workspaces myself for decades as a teenager, and when I was living in a dorm, and when I was traveling for conventions, and I probably ought to do a video about that at some point. Personally, I work from a converted dining room. We don't eat at a dining room table, we eat at the kitchen. And my husband and I both actually work from one room. She does mention utilizing a rolling cart, which many of us own, but she doesn't have any suggestions on how to set one up. A section on that would have made this book much more helpful and unique, and it would have made it very easy for me to recommend this book to other artists. If you've read other beginner watercolor books, you can really just skim the front part of her book, as she's not covering any new ground and she's not really adding anything particularly unique. The QR codes start popping up when we talk about using watercolor paints, but they're not consistent. A useful place to include a QR video code would be in the water to paint ratio section, as many people really struggle with this. That said, I love when these books get multimedia and multimodal and include additional resources and visuals, especially for artists who already built up a social media presence and may have a backlog of tutorials and resources to draw from. So, plus to her, she does have a section on taking inspiration from the world around you. The projects start on page 58, which is pretty far into the book. We have nice large hero images so you can see what you're painting. The colors are listed at the start of the project. I do wish the step-by-step photos were larger or more zoomed in, and I wish they actually demonstrated the steps. Strangely, the projects don't seem to include tutorial QR codes. This seems like a major misstep, and it would be a great way to see how she's handling that delicate wet into wet in, say, the wreath project on page 52, as she glosses over those steps. Maybe these projects are just straight up on her YouTube or something. It'd be nice to see them in action, and QR tutorials were literally advertised on the cover. I wish these books would dedicate less space to over-explaining the basics and more space to showing the step-by-step of each project, or maybe just fewer projects, or a longer book. I think the final projects are beautiful to look at. The tiny photos make it difficult to see the steps, and skipping steps makes it challenging for intermediate painters, let alone beginners, to paint along. With the landscape on page 90, we would have benefited from either seeing her reference photo or knowing that she was making it up from her imagination, and maybe some tips on constructing simple landscapes if that is actually the case. We didn't really get that many projects. We get stuff to do with our watercolors, but not necessarily a lot of projects. 15 projects total. Not that that's a bad number, but half the book is watercolor basics, and a third of the book is stuff to do with those finished paintings. So why not devote more space to how to paint those projects? She literally devotes as much space to turning the swallow into a gift tag as she devoted to painting some of the projects themselves. You could just show us the finished cutout swallow tag. We get it. The back of each template page has a different tip on it, which I think is pretty cute. Her art is very pretty, but the instructions are lacking in detail and depth, and much time is dedicated to watercolor basics better covered in other books, and how to use your watercolors after, which could have been condensed. While I love that she includes templates, I do wish she included more QR codes, particularly for the projects, as the instructions are so sparse. So, Watercolor Made Simple by Nicki Traikos doesn't actually succeed in the goal of making watercolor particularly simple. We have so many of these introduction to watercolor books aimed at an adult audience. You are spoiled for choice. Unfortunately, this book isn't going to hold your hand and really walk you through these projects in a way that a beginner painter might need to feel confident. That said, there are a lot of watercolor artists who hold online classes that you might find do a great job of explaining things in a way that you're comfortable with and can follow along with. In my Easily Influenced series, I explore some of these influential artists and art influencers. I even take some of their classes, and I definitely buy their books so that I can kind of walk you guys through which of these resources might be a good one for you. That said, while I enjoy Nicki Traikos' art, I think it is beautiful. I think she is quite a skilled artist and she has quite a charming art style. I cannot necessarily recommend Watercolor Made Simple if you're looking for a book that simplifies watercolor. If you're looking for some fun, interesting watercolor ideas and you're able to kind of work your way backwards from what she's doing and mainly use this as inspiration and you don't need it to kind of guide you through the process, this book isn't necessarily a bad resource for that, but I'm not sure if it's really worth the $24.99. What you could do if you want access to this book is fill out a library request form at your public library and request that they get a hold of it, and that way Nicki gets the money from the sale, you get access to the book, and other painters in your community also have access to this book. This is 15-minute watercolor masterpieces by Anna Koliadych. If I mispronounce that, I apologize. AKA DearAnnArt, referred to as an online art school. I also have her gouache book, and I'm going to be talking about that later in the video. This is a Page Street book. It promises to be helpful to beginner and experienced watercolors. It also promises breathtaking watercolor paintings in no time, as well as to teach efficient techniques like drawing with simple shapes, so I expect to see some sketches and underdrawings. This is $21.99 at the time of purchase in 2019. It has a nice clear table of contents. Subjects are broken off into topics like landscapes, foliage, galaxies, animals, so you can find a specific project to paint easily. And the supplies and advice are at the back of the book. So again, this promises masterpieces in 15 minutes. That seems to be a common promise with some of these books. There are 50 projects in this book. So I want to keep this review brief, so I'm going to focus on broad strokes and if it delivers on what is promised. This book has common Page Street issues: too many projects, too little space, not enough photos, too much text. DearAnnArt has a social media presence and is known for her online art school. Her Instagram is full of reels of cute watercolor demos with neat ideas. All are well staged and well lit. For time constraints, she obviously skips steps, but it still feels like an inviting place to learn new ideas. These days, her YouTube seems to be mainly shorts, same videos as on Insta, so probably the same for her TikTok, but years ago she did have cute, super short horizontal style tutorials. The format seems super watchable even to people who will probably never paint along. Basically, I do think you could dig up video examples of some of these projects and possibly see techniques demonstrated, but given how short the tutorials are, if you're struggling to pick up new concepts from the book, you may still have a lot of questions. I wish she would lead with what paper she's using. Cotton rag and cellulose handle very differently for wet into wet techniques. This book goes into materials at the end, and there is a list of materials for each project, but it just says watercolor paper. Even at the back of the book, she legitimately never mentions if she's using cotton rag or cellulose, and this is makes a big difference for how your painting may turn out. A lot of these wet into wet heavy projects have very little active painting time, but a very long dry time, which is a stretch on the concept of 15-minute watercolor. For a classroom setting, this isn't great. At home, you may be able to use this time in your favor as you juggle chores and art. If you are absolutely new to watercolor, this book skips too much information and too many steps. I feel like how-to art books should either include links where the information is presented or be all-inclusive for the projects described, in case the reader has limited internet access. She does often include a sketch for clarification, and I genuinely appreciate that. There's a cartoon diary-esque quality to these projects that I find to be very charming. I wish we got larger hero images of the finished projects to appreciate the finished pieces and to also better see the details, as all the step-by-step photos are quite small, and this is a common Page Street issue. Given the art style, I can see how it seems like a very approachable beginner book, but it's hard for me to recommend due to the lack of enough process photos to demonstrate techniques to beginners. Several of these projects are similar to those in Macchino's no-fail watercolor, like the undersea scene in Landscapes and the galaxy whale. And I guess something must have been in the water at the time, and that book is also a Page Street book, so it could have been the editor at the time. I think claiming these projects are 15 minutes or less is deceptive, as most of these so far are heavily wet into wet, and that can mean an hour dry time for some of these. She doesn't even really mention the dry time or if she uses a hairdryer or a heat gun. I feel this sets novice painters up for failure. The plants and foliage section is more inspiring, as it is more like watercolor sketching, and for those of y'all looking for 15-minute watercolor ideas, you may find this type of watercolor to be more appealing or more approachable. Some parts of this book are better than others, but it's full of cute ideas of things to paint, presented in a very simple manner. I recommend this for folks who already draw and paint a bit and are looking for boredom busters or inspiration. So, my verdict on Dear Anne's 15-minute watercolor masterpieces is, if you're a fan of Dear Anne's charming watercolor illustrations, you will enjoy this book. But if you're looking for a solid beginner watercolor instruction book, this book glosses over too much and has the same issues that other Page Street books have, but it is still a charming book, and it's full of adorable illustrations that might provide just the inspiration you need to take a chance and start painting. Now, as a watercolor comic artist and somebody who loves cartoony art, I am very biased in favor of the art style used in this book. While I have read and reviewed books that lean more realistic and books that lean more whimsical, I am personally a fan of cartooning, and I appreciate art books that champion more simplified art and present it as an option for people, because so many people think that realism is the end-all be-all for where it comes to art, and that might mean they never pick up a paintbrush. So if you can keep in mind that these projects are not actually 15-minute projects, at least give yourself an hour to paint these projects, and maybe consider having a hairdryer or a heat gun or your ceiling fan on to help with dry times. I think this is a wonderful, charming book full of adorable ideas that possibly can be modified for paint together activities, for watercolor journaling, or for creating adorable watercolor cards and illustrations. I'm in favor of any watercolor book that makes cartooning, drawing, and watercolor more approachable to the reader. And while these projects, most of which cannot be completed in 15 minutes unless it is a very dry day, I do think that this is a sweet and approachable book that you might enjoy. That said, it is fairly similar to Macchino's No Fail watercolor, and a lot of Page Street books are quite similar in terms of projects and presentation, and certainly in terms of covering the absolute basics. So I would recommend this book if you are a fan of DearAnnArt's art, or if you looked at me flipping through this book and you felt like this would be a good fit for you. I will have the link to where you can purchase this book, as well as her gouache book, down in the description below. And I will also be linking my other easily influenced videos where I take a look at art supplies and art books by influential artists and art influencers, and we talk about what products and what books might be a good fit for you. So I mentioned that I would review Anna Koliadych's gouache book, Gouache in 4 Easy Steps. We have this here. It's a beginner's guide to creating beautiful paintings in no time. This is another page treat book. It was $21.99. It promises 50 beginner-friendly projects, and it was published in 2021. And I need this because I barely ever use gouache, but I'd like to be more comfortable with it. It has a nice, clearly laid out table of contents with loads of cute illustrations. She recommends we read the first chapter on gouache techniques, but from there we can pick any project that we would like to get started. Generally, I'm not somebody looking for projects. I'm looking for information on how to use the product, on techniques, and, general inspiration. And something that she didn't really talk about, but if you're new to gouache, you should probably know that acrylic gouache is more like a matte acrylic and cannot be reworked unlike traditional gouache, which is basically a watercolor product with a higher pigment to binder ratio. Regular gouache still uses gum arabic as a binder, and it can be reactivated, unlike acrylic gouache. So something else I want to point out is that the materials that she recommends and generally how to use them, that's actually way at the back of the book instead of being at the front of the book with the techniques. So some of the notes that I wrote, I hadn't yet found where she talks about the materials. As with all Page Street books, the examples in this book could be bigger. There's so much white space on the page, and the images are so small and cramped that it's hard to see what's going on, especially for more detailed projects like her landscapes. When talking about paint consistency, photos of the brush to show what a damp brush looks like, or photos of a brush mixing the paint to show what the consistency should look like, i.e. heavy cream generally, would be helpful as well. She does talk about paper. It's way at the back of the book. I do wish that had been at the front of the book, and I wish she had recommended specific papers for specific projects, not necessarily brands, but for example, cotton rag cold press when you want dry brush. That is an area in general that I need help with, as well as the types of brushes suitable for gouache. My past attempts have been with watercolor brushes and watercolor paper, but maybe I should be using something else. She does mention at the front brush shapes, but not the material of the bristles. Do I want softer brushes? Do I want stiffer, natural, synthetic? At the back of the book, she actually says that you want stiffer bristles with some flexibility that are not going to hold water. She talks a little bit about mixing colors using the same color wheel we've all seen, but she also mentions that there will be a color mixing section for each project, and that seems helpful as mixing colors with gouache and acrylic can be challenging for a lot of people. And you guys can kind of see the colors mentioned and then the color mixing diagrams. Given that I'm not great with gouache, I decided I would practice along with some of the exercises at the beginning of the book. After doing some of the beginner exercises, I don't really feel like she explained how to use gouache well enough or with enough photos or step-by-step explanations. I actually did several of the starter exercises, and I think I succeeded because I know watercolor very well. I've actually used gouache in the past. I know acrylics decently well, and I have friends who use gouache. If you're new to traditional media art and picked up this book, she's not giving you the tools you need to get started. It would be helpful if she showed more photos featuring the consistency of gouache. It would be helpful if she mentioned which brand she's using. I'm using Holbein gouache because I have it, and because in general I love Holbein. Daniel Smith and Winsor M. Graham also make excellent quality gouaches. It would be helpful if she mentioned how to make sure you have your opacity right. For color mixing, she includes a color wheel, but she doesn't mention pigments or color names. We talk about cool and warm colors, but she provides limited examples, and we don't talk about how to mix clean secondary colors. I was able to do what I was able to do through noodling around and trial and error, which is fine and a normal part of learning art, but I feel like she could have done more by explaining further and giving more examples. Of course, this is a common Page Street problem, but as someone who is a beginner to gouache, I find it frustrating. And if I were an absolute beginner to the medium with no one to reach out to, and as I mentioned, I have several friends who use gouache, I would be even more frustrated and discouraged. Maybe the intention is to get us comfortable with gouache through the projects. Since this book is for beginner gouache artists, more time, space, and photos should be given to explaining how to use gouache and how to execute these techniques. Photos of the materials would be extremely helpful for a beginner, and it might empower them to go to the art supply store and ask for what they need. There's less than 16 pages of explanation on how to use gouache, which brushes, not brush styles, brush makeup, or brush brands is not covered. The paper doesn't seem to be covered. How to mix the paint is barely demonstrated. How to hold a brush is not demonstrated. Again, some of this is mentioned in the back, but a lot of it is really brief and not really enough information to empower a beginner artist. I know that with watercolor books, I've complained that we spend too much time covering the same ground, but here I think we could have spent more time with how to select and handle the paint, putting together a useful a basic useful palette of gouache, what that palette might look like if it differs from a watercolor palette, how to store and apply gouache, palettes to use, etc. This wouldn't be such a big deal if the projects themselves filled these gaps, but they don't, and it's kind of frustrating. I definitely can't recommend this book for an absolute beginner to water media. If y'all have gouache book recommendations, please let me know because I am genuinely interested in becoming more proficient with gouache and using it more often. I harp on this because the back of the book claims to be the ultimate beginner's guide to gouache. I don't want someone who is genuinely new to gouache and looking for real guidance to feel misled or feel like they're stupid or they're the problem. So some people are very smart and they might be able to pick up concepts quickly. And some folks have been watching gouache videos for years, so they've got the concept, but maybe they're looking for projects. So let's talk about the projects with this book. So the projects themselves, application and steps are skipped. For example, the Starry Night Sky, page 17, we go from sketch to the background and moon already applied. No explanation on how to hold or use the brushes, no demonstration of layering the paint. There's written descriptions, but photos would be way more helpful here. She does include a sketch, and I appreciate that as it makes it easier to see what she's going for from the get-go, and she does recommend, you might miss it because it's kind of hard to find, but she does actually recommend that you do your sketches first. A large hero image for each project would be helpful to allow you to see what's going on, but I do appreciate that she includes the project colors as well as mixing instructions so you can achieve the custom colors she's recommending. A lot of the issues with these projects are the same issues I had for her other book and are common Page Street issues. Page Street books are very formulaic and they tend to have the same problems over and over again. Her work carries forward the adorable, cartoony, sketchy style shown in the earlier book, and I really like that. So the next section, Flowers, does a better job demonstrating step by step and has projects that I'm more interested in executing in gouache. I know landscapes are perennially popular, but they're really not my thing. The flowers are simpler in subject matter, show the same amount of photo steps, but it's much easier to follow along. I wish we had started with this simpler subject matter so that we could build up confidence and skills as we work through the book. I know she said we could skip around, but from a layout point of view, it just makes sense to start with something bite-sized and easy. Once we get past the landscapes, I find the projects become a lot more interesting. Maybe landscapes should have been at the end of the book. Materials including explaining gouache paints and papers, as I mentioned, are covered in the back of the book. I found that out about halfway through this book. I am so used to this section being at the front of the book. That's pretty common with Page Street books, so I didn't think to check the back until I was halfway through. I'm marking up projects that I'd like to revisit or try out with my own spin when I have time, which I sense the irony there. When am I ever going to have time? But there are actually a lot of really cute ideas in this book. It just doesn't do a great job explaining how to replicate those ideas. I think the patterns section is very cute and approachable, as it's very simplified with limited techniques to focus on filling the page. Basically, when she pulls back and focuses on simple objects or a single object, I feel like these are the strongest, most appealing projects. It allows her to show us some detail as well as some fun color play. Her more complicated projects, something kind of gets lost in the sauce there. Once we get past the landscapes, there are tons of cute projects that seem quite approachable for a gouache beginner. I do wish she spent more time explaining and demonstrating how to use gouache, and I personally wish the material section had been at the front, as that's conventional. She often includes alternative spins on projects, and sometimes I wish she'd flesh those out and dedicate space to them as well, or at least larger images, because some of those alternatives are really cute and could stand alone as projects themselves. With Page Street books, I feel artists are pressured to include more projects rather than really fleshing out and explaining a few well-conceived projects. This makes Page Street books difficult to follow along, especially for absolute beginners. That said, Page Street reaches out to a variety of artists, so you're more likely to find an artist who matches your vibe in the Page Street catalog. Of course, there are other books on using gouache out there. Again, I'm looking forward to your recommendations. And when learning a new medium, I would always recommend you learn from a variety of sources so that you have a well-rounded understanding. As always, when I'm reviewing these art books, all opinions are my own and they are based on my experience as an artist myself, who has kind of a mixed area of how I've learned. I have both formal training and I've learned from books and from the internet, as well as a fellow art educator who has in-classroom experience with teaching a wide array of ages and experience levels, as well as somebody who teaches on the internet and used to write a blog. All opinions are my own. They are based on my own experiences. If you feel that you would enjoy this book, then by all means, please consider supporting it.
So we talked about 4 watercolor and gouache. Gouache is an opaque watercolor books today. Let me know if you've read any of these, which are your favorites, and if there are any watercolor books that you think I should read. This is going to be listed under the Easily Influenced series, even though there's no like classes, or I mean, some of these artists do offer classes. I just didn't choose to purchase the classes, or brushes or watercolor sets involved. I am always on the lookout for good watercolor drawing and gouache books. So if you have some recommendations, if you have some favorites, I'd love to hear all about them, either in the comments or over on Blue Sky. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I have a moth and butterfly theme going on here. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I hope you found this helpful, useful, and inspirational. And please keep in mind, if you can't afford to buy books, you can always fill out a library request form and ask your public library to get a hold of them. That still supports the artist, and it grants you access to books and others in your community access to books that you might not otherwise have, because not everybody can or wants to have a hoard of art books. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I look forward to seeing you guys again in the future, and I look forward to hearing your gouache and watercolor book recommendations. Bye guys!